Chapter 15. Colors. Days passed in Lin Zeyuan's villa, the way sand slipped through loosely held fingers, quietly, without announcement. Their routines settled into something almost domestic. He left early every morning, coat buttoned, hair still faintly damp, the scent of antiseptic and coffee trailing behind him as the door closed softly. She left later, carrying rolled papers or a carefully wrapped artifact sketch, her steps unhurried, her presence lingering in the empty house long after she was gone. And in the evenings, they returned, sometimes together, often not. The study became the only place where their worlds overlapped. It was a large room, divided not by walls, but by purpose. On the window side stood Lin Zeyuan's territory, a wide desk stacked with medical files, journals annotated in his precise handwriting, and an antique brass lamp casting a steady pool of light. Psychology texts lined the shelves behind him, their spines worn, some marked with thin slips of paper. That side of the room always smelled faintly of ink and old books. The other side belonged, gradually, to Chen Lian. A wide sofa, its armrest draped with a soft cloth to protect it from paint stains, a low table cluttered with restoration tools, brushes of varying thickness, pigments sealed in glass jars, sketchbooks stacked unevenly. Canvases leaned against the wall, half-finished studies, fragments of color waiting to become something whole. She had chosen this place deliberately, not to intrude, just to be nearby. She liked working there because she could see him without needing to speak. The way he read with his brows slightly drawn together, the pause before he turned a page, the subtle tension in his shoulders when a case troubled him. Some evenings they spoke only a few words. "Did you eat?" "Later. There's soup in the kitchen. Thank you." Other nights, silence stretched comfortably between them, filled only by the scratch of her pencil and the soft rustle of paper. It was during these ordinary moments that Chen Lian began to notice. At first, it was nothing more than a passing thought. He wasn't wearing the ring. Not that night, not the next. She told herself it was practical. Hospitals were strict. Jewelry could be inconvenient. He worked with patience after all. But days turned into weeks. She saw it when he reached for a cup, when he adjusted his glasses, when he loosened his cuffs at the desk. His left hand was always bare. Her own ring, by contrast, never left her finger. She barely noticed it anymore. It had become part of her, like a quiet promise she didn't know what to do with. Once, while cleaning her brushes at the sink, she caught their reflections in the glass. Her hand adorned, his empty. Something in her chest tightened, sharp but brief. She didn't mention it. She never asked. Instead, she began to understand. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was a boundary. One evening, she started working on a new canvas in the study. Broad strokes at first, muted tones, layered carefully. The subject wasn't clear yet, even to her. She painted slowly, thoughtfully, occasionally glancing up. Lin Zeyuan sat across the room, absorbed in a file, the lamp casting soft shadows across his face. He looked up once, briefly. Their eyes met. Neither smiled, but neither looked away immediately, either. She noticed his hand resting on the desk, steady, unadorned, and in that quiet moment, something settled inside her. He wasn't rejecting her. He was protecting himself from expectations, from assumptions, from feelings he hadn't agreed to carry. Chen Lian lowered her gaze back to the canvas, her brush moving with renewed care. If he wasn't ready to wear the ring, then she wouldn't force meaning onto it. She would stay where she was, nearby, steady, present. Not as a wife demanding recognition, but as someone who chose to remain, even when unseen. Across the room, Lin Zeyuan turned another page, unaware of the small decision she had just made, one that would change the way she loved him from that day forward. The study was quiet when Chen Lian stepped inside. Morning light spilled through the tall window, soft and pale, stretching across the long desk on the other side of the room. Lin Zeyuan wasn't there. His chair stood empty, pushed back just slightly, as if he had risen in a hurry. She moved to her usual place and sat on the sofa, her hands resting loosely in her lap. From here, she could see his table clearly. It always looked the same, orderly, restrained, untouched by chaos. Today, though, something felt off. Files were stacked unevenly, and a few folders were left ajar. A medical chart lay half-covered beneath another, its corner catching the sunlight. She tilted her head. He must have been busy. Her gaze lingered, drifting across the desk, noticing details she usually overlooked. Pens. Not just one or two, but many. Different weights, different tips. Some are dark, some are metallic, and a few are worn smooth from use. It made her pause. She glanced at her own side of the room. Her pencils were arranged the same way. Charcoal, graphite, colored leads, each sharpened differently, chosen for specific purposes. The parallel surprised her. She had never thought of Zeyuan as someone particular about such things. Precise, yes, but this felt personal. The silence stretched. She checked her phone. A message from Mei Shui sat unanswered. Out with family today. We'll call later. Lian set the phone aside. The house felt larger in the quiet. After a moment, she stood and walked toward the bookshelf lining his side of the study. Most of the spines were familiar. Clinical psychology, psychiatry, and neurology. Dense titles, serious ones. She scanned them idly, her fingers brushing along the shelves. Just for a moment, she told herself. She stopped at a book whose heading caught her attention, not because she fully understood it, but because it felt out of place. She pulled it free. Something slipped loose. A small notebook slid from between the pages and landed softly on the rug. Lian blinked. She bent down and picked it up. It was unremarkable. Dark cover, edges slightly worn. No lock, no decoration. Returning to the sofa, the book forgotten, she turned the notebook over in her hands. On the first page, written in neat, restrained handwriting, was a simple title. Colores Around Me. Her brows drew together faintly. She opened it. The pages were filled, not with paragraphs, not with sketches, but with colors. Carefully written names, lines drawn beside them, brief notes. Pale blue, emotional withdrawal, controlled breathing. Dull red, irritation masked as politeness. Gray with sharp edges, exhaustion, suppressed anxiety. Muted green, resignation, low emotional arousal. Page after page. Colores, marks, meanings, no dates, no names. Lian turned the pages slowly, her expression still. It felt like reading a language she didn't quite speak, but somehow recognized. As an art restorer, colors were never just colors to her. They carried history, intent, and emotion. She had spent years learning how pigment alone could hold grief, reverence, devotion. These notes weren't careless. They were deliberate. Her first thought came quietly, almost with a trace of amused surprise. Does he like art too? Some associations made sense to her. Others were strange, too precise, too consistent to be a coincidence. She didn't feel alarmed. She felt curious. Closing the notebook gently, she rested it against her knee. Whoever Zeyuan was at the hospital, controlled, distant, unreadable. This notebook suggested someone else entirely. Someone who observed, someone who analyzed, someone who translated the world into something survivable. She didn't understand it, not yet, but for the first time she wondered how much of him she had never truly seen. Outside the window, sunlight continued to spill across his empty chair, touching the edge of the desk. Quiet, patient, waiting. Later that night, Lian's sleep would not come. Lian lay still in the dark, eyes open, the ceiling fading in and out of focus as her thoughts refused to settle. Every time she closed her eyes, the same image surfaced again, the notebook. Not the cover, not the title, the pages. Colores Around Me, carefully written, methodical, almost restrained. She remembered how she had turned each page slowly, afraid of rushing something fragile. There were no dates, no names, just colors, repeated again and again, each time paired with a different emotional state. Pale blue meant withdrawal once, another time, fatigue, once something that felt unfinished, uncertain. The patterns never stayed the same. That unsettled her more than anything. As an art restorer, she understood color instinctively. Pigment shifted meaning with context, history, and pressure. But even then, artists usually circled back to their own logic. This felt different, as if he had been trying to understand something that wouldn't stay still long enough to be named. Her fingers curled lightly into the sheets. Does he like colors? The question slipped in before she could stop it. She remembered the pens on his desk, different weights, different tips, chosen deliberately, used often, not decorative, necessary. For a fleeting moment, a gentler thought followed. Had he ever wanted to be an artist? Someone who saw the world like this, who cataloged color with such care, couldn't have thought that have been possible? Had medicine been a choice or a redirection? Her chest tightened at the thought. Why study people so clinically, if not to make sense of something personal? She turned onto her side, then back again. Sleep still refused her. Abruptly she sat up. The room felt too quiet, too still. She rose from the bed and crossed the floor barefoot, stopping in front of the door. Her hand closed around the cool metal of the doorknob. Go ask him. The impulse was sudden and sharp. Ask about the notebook. Ask what the colors meant. Ask why some entries felt so certain and others almost hesitant, as if even he hadn't trusted his own conclusions. Her grip tightened. Then she stopped. An image surfaced uninvited. His left hand, bare. No ring, not forgotten. Removed, a boundary clearly drawn. This marriage was still structured, still careful, still governed by agreement, not assumption. Her heart sank, not painfully, but with quiet clarity. He had let her see pieces of his life, but not all of it, and not on demand. Slowly, she released the doorknob. Her hand rose to her temple, pressing lightly, as if to still the restless thoughts. Stop, she told herself firmly. This was his private world. If he wanted to explain, he would do so on his own terms. And if he didn't, then curiosity, no matter how gentle, didn't give her the right to cross that line. She turned back to the bed and lay down again, staring into the dark. The questions didn't disappear, but she let them remain unanswered, unspoken, outside his door, for now. The boardroom. Next morning. The boardroom was unusually quiet. No assistants, no shareholders, no long table filled with voices competing for authority. Only Lin Shiren was at the head of the table, and Lin Ruqiang was seated to his right. Sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows, casting long, orderly lines across the polished surface. The company seal gleamed faintly at the far wall, a reminder of legacy rather than certainty. Lin Ruqiang broke the silence first. "Brother," he said, folding his hands comfortably, "you've spoken about retirement more than once now. But if no one steps into that seat afterward, how do you expect the company to function?" His tone was measured, reasonable. The implication beneath it was not. Lin Shiren did not look at him immediately. His gaze lingered on the city below, cars moving in neat patterns, systems running smoothly because someone unseen kept them that way. He knew exactly where Ruqiang was steering the conversation. And still, the disappointment settled heavily in his chest, not toward his brother, but toward his son. Zeyuan had refused the director's position again. Not angrily, not definitely, simply, calmly, as if the seat held no meaning at all. Shiren closed his eyes briefly before answering. "Zeyuan has made his choice," he said at last. "I won't force him, not anymore." Ruqiang's eyes flickered. "And the company?" he pressed. "Legacy doesn't run on intentions alone." Shiren turned back to the table, his voice steady but lacking its usual certainty. "If my son won't take the role," he said slowly, "then we'll find someone suitable. The seat won't remain empty." The words were meant to close the discussion. Instead, they opened a door. Lin Ruqiang's lips curved, subtle, pleased. He leaned forward, enthusiasm slipping just enough past restraint to reveal itself. "You're absolutely right," he said. "And that's exactly why I wanted to speak with you today." Shiren's expression did not change. He already knew. "I have a candidate to suggest." Silence followed. No surprise. Recognition. Ruqiang continued smoothly, as if the name were inevitable, rather than strategic. "My son, Zeyuan. He'll be returning next month. He's completed his studies in foreign marketing, with excellent evaluations." A pause. "I believe he could be a valuable asset." Shiren listened without interruption. When he finally spoke, his response was mild, almost disarming. "That's good news," he said. I didn't realize he was returning so soon. It's been years since I last spoke with him. Ruqiang nodded, pleased. He's grown a great deal. Then, after a beat carefully timed, he added, do you think he would be suitable for the director's position? The question hung in the air. Sharen did not answer immediately. He neither rejected the idea nor welcomed it. Instead, he folded his hands on the table, his gaze thoughtful, measured. Would depend on more than timing or lineage. Ruqiang smiled, unbothered. He had what he wanted. The conversation had begun, and for the first time since Zeyuan's refusal, the future of the seat felt dangerously negotiable. It was a holiday. Chen Lian woke much later than usual, sunlight already spilling across the floor in lazy bands. For a moment, she lay still, disoriented, then remembered why. She had stayed up far too late the night before, thoughts looping, ideas blooming faster than sleep could catch them. She washed up slowly, unhurried, then changed into soft, comfortable clothes with loose sleeves, worn fabric, something meant for long hours of standing and thinking rather than being seen. Today wasn't for obligations, it was for creating. With her hair loosely tied back and her mind already buzzing with a new concept, she went straight to the study. The door swung open, and she froze. Her side of the room looked like a small storm passed through. Cardboards were stacked unevenly. Wooden planks were scattered across the floor. Measuring tape, pencils, scraps of paper everywhere. The raw skeleton of an idea sprawled messily, unapologetic. She glanced instinctively to the other half of the room. Lin Zeyuan's side was untouched, clean, precise. Files aligned, desk clear, chair tucked in exactly as it always was. The contrast made her wince. I'll clean it after, she murmured to herself, cheeks warming slightly. Once it's done. Convincing enough. She took a deep breath, rolled up her sleeves, and stepped fully into her world. Time dissolved. She knelt on the floor, arranging wooden planks, adjusting angles, testing balance. Her hands moved with quiet confidence, instinct guiding her more than conscious thought. She forgot the room, forgot the house, forgot everything except the shape forming beneath her fingers. By the time she leaned back, breath shallow, only half of it was complete. Her shoulders ached, her eyes burned faintly. Satisfied for now, she curled slightly against the sofa nearby, resting her head against the armrest. Just a short nap, she thought. Lin Zeyuan stood near his bedroom window, phone pressed to his ear, gaze distant. Zhao Wen was talking, animated, as usual. I'm telling you, Zhao Wen said lightly, you're ridiculously lucky. Marrying someone like Chen Lian, calm, intelligent, talented, most people don't find that in a lifetime. Zeyuan hummed faintly in response, non-committal. And you've been zoning out since the wedding, Zhao Wen continued. In the hospital, during meetings, even when I talk to you. Anyone would think you're completely taken. Zeyuan's eyes drifted to the greenery outside. Lucky. Taken. If only it were that simple. Inside his own mind, the truth sat quietly, unchanged. A contract, a boundary, an agreement built on necessity, not emotion. That was all it was supposed to be. And yet, his gaze unfocused, that white gold mist surfaced uninvited in his thoughts. The calm it brought. The clarity, the way his senses settled only when she was near. Why only her? No matter how many times he tried to analyze it, the answer refused to take shape. Zhao Wen laughed softly. You don't deny it. I'll take that as confirmation. Enough, Zeyuan said calmly. I'm ending the call. Hey, wait. He disconnected before the sentence could finish. Lowering the phone, Zeyuan exhaled slowly, tension unwinding from his chest. He stared out the window, focusing on the steady green of the trees, the predictability of stillness. Quiet, control. And yet, without intending to, his thoughts drifted to the other side of the study. To the sounds earlier, wood shifting, soft movement. To her. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Some questions, he reminded himself, were better left unanswered. Chen Lian woke with a start. For a second she was disoriented, half dream, half reality, until her eyes focused. Color. Her heart dropped.
Several paint bottles had tipped over near the work area, their caps loose, red and yellow spreading across the floor in slow, merciless streams. A few brushes lay scattered, their bristles stained beyond saving. She jolted upright. As she moved, her elbows struck the small side table. Brushes clattered to the ground in rapid succession, the sharp noise cutting through the quiet house. Ah! The sound echoed. Lin Zeyuan, stepping onto the balcony moments earlier, froze. The noise was wrong. Too sudden, too sharp. Without thinking, he turned and moved faster than he usually allowed himself to down the hall and toward the study. Back inside, Chen Lian stood amid the chaos. Sleep fully gone now. Annoyance replaced panic. Why does this always happen at the worst moment? She hissed under her breath. She turned toward the door just as it swung open. Lin Zeyuan stopped short. The study was a mess. Red and yellow paint had mixed across the floor in uneven streaks. Brushes lay everywhere. Drops had splashed onto the legs of the desk, the edge of the sofa. His gaze locked onto the colors, too vivid, too close. Chen Lian felt suddenly ridiculous, like a child caught making a mess she couldn't explain. She laughed awkwardly, forcing lightness into her voice. "Oh, sorry. I must have moved in my sleep and—" She gestured vaguely. "I'll clean it. It's fine." She stepped carefully, trying to avoid the slick surface, and slipped. Her foot caught a fallen branch. "Wait!" Lin Zeyuan lunged forward on instinct, reaching for her arm. He missed. Momentum took them both. They went down hard, bodies colliding as paint splashed upward, red and yellow streaking across their clothes, soaking into fabric with no chance of mercy. For a breathless second, neither moved. They were on the floor, too close. Chen Lian's arms were wrapped around him, his hand pressed against her back, paint smeared between them like a permanent mark. Slowly they looked up. This close there was nowhere to hide. Her eyes widened slightly, surprise giving way to something quieter. His breath caught, not from the fall, but from the nearness. Then, "Young master," the voice snapped the moment in two. Butler Wu hurried in, alarm clear in his tone. "I heard a sound and—" He stopped, saw them, and immediately turned around. "Oh, I didn't see anything," he said briskly, facing the door with professional dignity. "I'll wait outside." Reality crashed back in. Chen Lian scrambled upright at the same time Zeyuan did, both stepping back too quickly, neither meeting the other's eyes. Awkwardness filled the room like static. Zeyuan cleared his throat. Butler Wu cautiously turned back. His gaze dropped to their clothes, now vividly stained. He sighed, not annoyed, just resigned. "I'll take care of this," he said calmly. "Both of you should go freshen up." Chen Lian hesitated. "But the floor—" "It's not a problem, young madam," Butler Wu interrupted gently. "Everything important will be put back properly. Please don't worry." Her heart was still racing. Grateful for the excuse, she nodded quickly and slipped past them, leaving the study without another word. Behind her, the smell of paint lingered, and so did the silence. Neither of them knew how to break it. Chen Lian slipped into her room and shut the door behind her. The soft click echoed louder than it should have. She leaned back against the wood, chest rising too fast, fingers still faintly stained with color. For a moment, she didn't move, just stood there, letting the rush pass through her. 3 minutes, that was all it had been. 3 minutes of chaos, color, and a closeness she hadn't been prepared for. She pressed a hand over her heart, willing it to slow. Why is it beating like this? She had never seen Lin Zeyuan from that close before. Not the careful distance he usually kept, not the calm profile across a table. But his eyes, clear, focused, almost startled, were close enough that she could see the faint tension beneath his composure. Not cold, not distant. She slid down onto the edge of the bed, burying her face briefly in her hands. "Get a grip, Chen Lian. It was an accident, nothing more." And yet the warmth lingered in a way she couldn't explain. She drew a slow breath, then another, grounding herself until her pulse finally began to settle. Across the hall, Lin Zeyuan stood motionless in his room. The mirror reflected a version of himself he wasn't used to seeing.
Red and yellow paint streaked across his white shirt. Chaotic, uncontrolled, unmistakable. The colors hadn't faded. They clung, vivid and permanent. He stared. This had never happened before. Not the stain, not the feeling. He should have felt lighter after leaving the study, the way he always did once distance was restored. Instead, something sat heavy in his chest, tight and unresolved. Complex, disruptive. He lifted his hand slightly, then let it fall. The colors weren't overwhelming, but they weren't neutral either. They carried weight, expectation, presence, a proximity he hadn't calculated for. His jaw tightened. For years he had learned to manage what he saw, what he felt, what he allowed himself to stand nearby. Control was safety, distance was clarity. And yet in that moment on the floor, with her breath too close and her eyes searching his, something had fractured. Not loudly, quietly. A doubt surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. Am I fit to stand this close to someone? The thought disturbed him more than the mess, more than the stain, more than the breach of routine. Because the colors around Chen Lian had never confused him before. And now, they did. He looked away from the mirror, exhaling slowly, forcing the familiar calm back into place. This was nothing, just an accident, just color. Still, the red and yellow remained bright against the white, refusing to be ignored. And for the first time in a long while, Zeyuan wasn't entirely certain whether distance would fix this or only make it worse. Mei Xu worked with steady concentration, her gloved hands moving with practiced precision. Under the soft restoration lights, she adjusted a fine brush, applying pigment in careful layers, restoring life to a fragment of history, piece by piece. Time passed unnoticed until a familiar awareness crept in. She straightened slightly. Someone was watching, not intrusively, not close enough to interrupt, but consistently enough that it was impossible to ignore. She didn't turn at first. She finished the stroke, set the brush aside, and exhaled slowly. Then she removed her gloves, cleaned her hands thoroughly, and arranged the tools neatly back in their places. Only then did she turn. Zeyuan stood near the edge of the workspace, hands in his coat pockets, expression thoughtful rather than casual, eyes fixed not on her, but on the work she had been doing. Mei Xu crossed her arms. "Dr. Zhao," she said flatly, "what exactly is the meaning of this?" He blinked, once, then frowned slightly. "Meaning of what?" She tilted her head, irritation slipping into her tone. "Observing like this, honestly, it suits you a little too well." For a moment he looked genuinely lost. Then realization hit. "Oh." His mouth curved into an embarrassed smile. "Ah, if that's how it came across, sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." He gestured toward the restored section. "I was just watching how you work. You're incredibly detail-oriented. It's impressive." Mei Xu narrowed her eyes. That wasn't the answer she expected. "Then why do you always end up here?" she asked. "Don't you have patience to handle?" Zeyuan winced theatrically. That was sharp. Then he sighed, more honestly this time. "But fair. Yes, I do. Or did. My session's wrapped up early today." He shrugged. "And Zeyuan is booked solid, as usual. So I suddenly found myself with free time." Her eyes widened. "What?" She stared at him as he'd confessed to a crime. "So this is how you work in the same department?" she said incredulously. "Leaving all the responsibility to your colleagues and wandering around doing something completely useless?" Inside, Zeyuan was laughing. So this is how she sees it. Unemployed by choice, apparently. Outwardly, he raised both hands in surrender. "You've got it all wrong, Miss May," he said lightly. "My patients were handled. Session's done. I just needed to divert my mind for a bit. So I walked, and somehow ended up here." Mei Xu studied him for a long moment. Something still didn't add up, but she had no intention of digging further. "Whatever," she said finally, already turning away. "I'm heading out." She walked past him without another glance. Zeyuan watched her go, a small smile tugging at his lips. That was close, he thought. Very close. And for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he found himself hoping, She wouldn't stop noticing him, no matter how annoyed she pretended to be.